How's it going? I'm Callum Griffith of CG Digital, and today I have with me special guest Christopher Fuller of Griot. Christopher, thank you so much for agreeing to join me today and agreeing to share your story. Can you can you tell me a little bit about what you do and about your company?
Well, I am a graphic facilitator and a graphic recorder, and basically what that means is that I create visual stories for organizations, and I do this mainly by either creating presentations for them, like PowerPoint style presentations, but hand drawn, uh, and also I do predominantly a lot of live listening at strategy meetings, visioning sessions, and I capture their thoughts in an organized visual way. If you've seen the RS Animate videos, it was born from that field of
Right.
visual facilitation. And then I also create other visual uh, products such as video and posters, infographics, that kind of thing.
Cool. So how did you first get into this? How did you start in your career?
Well, I graduated with a degree in visual art from Rutgers College in New Jersey, and that art degree. Let me tell you, it was a ticket to instant money in the big time. And no, actually, I struggled a bit out of school. With freelance jobs and sending out my portfolio and trying to get illustration jobs. I tried to land with some of the comic book companies, the big two, and Disney, and uh, my circumstances brought me to Orlando, where my parents had moved while I was in college.
Right.
So I started freelance caricature work, and there happened to be a small boutique consulting company called MG Taylor Corporation. Very small, but its influence was mighty, especially looking back at how they influenced big consulting and also the graphic recording field. Anyway, I volunteered for a project that they were doing
Right.
for the city of Orlando, and from that volunteer job that did not pay me a nickel, they recognized my talent, asked me if I wanted to be a part of the network. I did. Worked with them. We had a great ride. We got Ernst and Young licensed our methodology, turned into a big global thing.
Right.
It was pretty neat ride there in the '90s or mid '90s, and then I left to go out on my own, as basically concentrating solely on the graphic part, and
Right.
I've been doing that ever since.
Cool. So just to summarize, so you graduate from school in New Jersey with an art degree,
Yes,
and your focus and your intention was to become a cartoon artist, right?
yes, yes.
And so you moved to LA then?
No, not then. I was still in Jersey, and I was trying to, move into New York. I was sending my to, the agencies in New York, and
Right, right.
taking the train into the city. Uh, but no, I did not move to Los Angeles, where I'm currently based, until, um, about 14 years ago. Yeah,
Right.
been in LA ever since.
So you're a struggling artist, and you end up in Florida, and you ended up working for a company called MG Taylor.
Yes, consulting company. Yes, I
So
did
how
strategy
did you
consulting.
how did you find them? What was the process of discovering that, and how did you find that this is something that you wanted to keep doing and pursue?
Well, I've been out of school for about a year, and MG Taylor was doing. They were at that time they were based in Orlando, and they were facilitating this um, big citywide meeting on volunteerism. And the meeting was called the City of Light, and a lot of big companies involved. The mayor, all the big muckety mucks, and MG Taylor were the facilitators. And as part of their process, they would use graphic recorders. It was very unique in that way as part of their strategy
Right,
um,
right,
consulting. And since this was a big, huge meeting with multiple workshops going on, they did not have enough people, in their core, so they had to get volunteers and do like a basically. give us a crash course. I
Right.
found out about it through my father, actually, because my father was at that time was an exec for AT&T, but also heavily involved in the community in Orlando. And so he had done one of MG Taylor's city events and said, hey, there's this thing going on, and it's pretty interesting. They have these meetings where people talk and dialogue and on community things. And there's a guy, like an artist, who captures the thoughts and writes notes. I think that, it's kind of strange, but, you're kind of strange. And I think, I think that you could really, you should check it out. You should volunteer for this. So it piqued my interest just enough.
You started, so you first started by volunteering, though.
It wasn't a paid. Hey, and my first thought was, I want to, because, like I said, I was a freelance artist, and had been doing a lot of free stuff for like community, and I was getting tired.
Artist,
right? I almost said no, but this wasn't just. This sounded interesting and different enough that I was like, you know what? I think I should listen to Pops and at least go check it out. And that's what he said, just go check it out. So when I went to the demonstration of what a graphic recorder does, the owner of the company, Matt Taylor, kind of introduced us to the process, while one of their guys was just basically doing a visual mind map, on this big wall. And I remember just watching the demonstration, and this is like almost 30 years ago, my jaw hit the floor. Well, I was just like, what the, this guy is listening and drawing, and then I remember, I was like, why wasn't this at the job fair? Like, is this a career? So I made sure that I said, okay, I'm in. I want to do this.
Right.
And just to cement that, I waited until all the other volunteers had left.
Yeah.
So that I could get a one-on-one with Matt Taylor, the owner of the company. And I just said briefly, sir, I don't know what this is that I just saw, but I think I was born to do this.
Right.
And I remember he just looked at me and kind of smiled and said, well, here are your markers and good luck on Monday,
Wow.
And from there, that starts my whole career.
So you kind of just, I guess, fell into your niche, right? And by putting yourself out there and putting yourself on the line, I guess, in front of Matt Taylor, you were able to find your niche and immediately get a job within that career.
Yeah, I made enough of an impression. They said, hey, this one guy who volunteered, let's, make sure that we stay in touch with that guy. And so I tell people, sometimes I speak at schools on like career days and this kind of thing. Yeah. And my message to kids is, don't chase money, chase interesting opportunities. Chase things that you would love to do and have an interest about. And don't worry about the money, because if you're talented and if you pursue it hard enough, that those things will come.
Yeah. Wow. So let's fast forward and to the point that you're working with big companies and you've made it. When did you first realize that you made it? You're doing what you love doing for a living, and you're living comfortably. What does that look like for you, and when did you realize?
When I had I had built up, over time, you built up your own little network of people who come to rely on your skills because they recognize what you can do. And when I noticed that people who had worked with me started to proselytize for me, like, there was a while there where I didn't even have to do a lot of marketing, because if people had seen me, especially, for instance, the healthcare industry, which is in the last 10 years, I've made a pretty big imprint, because I've worked with, Kaiser Permanente here on the West Coast, Catholic Health, and a lot of other big companies. But they would say, hey, where'd you guys get the strategy map? Oh, well, there's this guy in California and LA. And so I noticed that I would just get calls from people who said, hey, we heard about you.
Right.
And so when you get the ability to start turning down work, I was just like, okay, this is. For instance, I remember I got a call from an industry that I didn't want any. I had personal reasons for it. I didn't want anything
Yep.
to do with. It is the tobacco industry, and I've got some personal reasons why I'm just against that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they had called me up and offered me a, pretty nice, for just a 1 day, and to fly and to go to London, and I was just like, no, no, and I let them know why, and
Right.
I just,
Right.
after hanging up the phone, I was just like, wow, I'm kind of shocked, that I turned that down. Yeah,
Right. So you shocked yourself by turning down the gig,
yeah,
and
yeah, because it
in
was
that
lucrative.
moment you realized that you had made it and you had hit success in
Yeah.
some form.
At some level, yeah, just because let's face it, I it's very hard for when people look at certain, like, especially, like, let's say, and take an actor for instance, and you might see their early career and they're just in some pitiful movie and just like, wow, I thought so and so was better than this, but
Right. Right.
in the beginning part of your career, when you're trying to put food on the table and keep a roof over your head, you might have to make um, not another teen movie 8 or whatever,
Yeah.
one of those garbage movies. But then you get to a certain level where you can start picking your own scripts. And so for me, as a graphic facilitator, I got to a point where I could, pick my own scripts.
Right. Right. So I know that you've worked with some very very big companies. Can you list a couple of them and then say what it's like working with really big companies?
Oh, sure. I've worked with um, Facebook, and I've worked with um, uh, Google, and I've worked with, and then, okay, that's on the tech side. I've worked on the entertainment side. I've worked with Disney. I've worked with Warner Brothers. I've done a lot of work, once again, in the healthcare field. Uh, Kaiser, Mayo Clinic, I did a session for. Just, yeah, I mean, you name it, and
Right.
I've also done this now on 5 continents. If you had told me when I was, a young kid in Jersey that, in drawing in class, and the teacher would tell me to put that pencil down, that pen down, and stop drawing and just listen and pay attention. And I wish I had a time machine. I'd go back and just, no, just actually just keep drawing. this is
Right.
this
Right.
is people
Yeah.
all around the world. Yeah.
So what is it like working with really big companies?
Well, each company has their own culture,
Yeah.
and the first thing that when I get contacted about a job, like, I don't just want to know the objectives, or just, what, I mean, I do want
Right.
to know that, but I will ask, like, some cultural questions about, okay, but going into this meeting, I imagine there are going to be some things that won't be said, but
Right.
culturally, but are probably bubbling under the surface. It's probably good for me to know just culturally what's going on in the company. And, most companies will be pretty frank with you about their culture,
Right.
um, because they want, my job is not just to make a picture, it's to be a reporter. And so they want me to be a truth teller, uh, a fair broker, but with a marker. And so, yeah, I like to understand the culture of companies. And, you know, like, for instance, there are certain companies that are very open,
Yeah.
and then there are some where it's very hierarchical. Um, and I'm not saying, what's better or worse, but it's just, you just understand that, going in, that, and it helps your job a lot better.
Right. Right. So do you prefer working with large companies or smaller companies?
Well,
What do you
I
prefer?
think the real thing is, do I prefer working with small groups? Because sometimes even within a big company, there can be like a little skunk works kind of group of people,
Yeah.
and I typically, I like working. as intimately as possible. I've done a lot of big, huge conferences. I would do this huge healthcare conference every year, which was like 1,000 people, and I'm just like one of many moving parts. And as interesting as that was, I like even better when it's just me in a room with 12 people.
Yeah.
And I can have some real face-to-face interaction with people. Yeah.
Right.
And that can be, like I said, that can be a giant company, or that can be, a boutique firm.
So I guess it depends more on the actual project.
Yeah, it depends on the actual project.
Right. So do you have some advice for people that think that they want to work for really big companies?
Gosh, yes. If you want to work with really big companies, first off, you have to realize that you're not going to just work with really big companies right off.
Right.
For the most part, there's a process. To get to a certain level, you've got to prove yourself at each level. And I tell people that no matter what job you do at those beginning stages, you have to give it your all.
Yeah.
You have to show people that even in those low-level jobs, that you take initiative, that you can deliver on time, that you can hit a deadline, and that you can be collaborative.
Right.
And by doing that, that will get you to a point that when, and this could be, a year's process. It might not be an instant process, but it will get you to that point that when it's your time at bat, you're ready.
Right.
Because you don't want to go into a big company, a big corporation like that, and this isn't school. You can't half-ass it. They're gonna recognize that.
Right.
And they're not gonna bring you back. So yeah, you gotta show and prove.
So to summarize, you have to prove yourself at each level and work your way up by putting out 100% effort at each stage, right?
Yeah. It's like you hear the stories about people who got to the exec level and started in the mailroom, and I can guarantee you that when they were in the mailroom, they were the best damn mail sorter that was working for the company.
Right.
So
your uncle. Would you say then it's more about your work ethic and how professional you are and how you compose yourself then, as opposed to putting out necessarily the best work in the industry?
Well, that's a big part of it. It's a pie, and I guess I would say for the average person, the person that doesn't, like me, that didn't have a lot of connections, and that's going to be a lot bigger slice of the pie for you.
Right. So I've heard some of the stories from you. I know it's not all glory, and I know there's bad experiences with some of these companies. And you don't have to name names or anything, but can you describe the worst experience you've had in your career that made you change how you worked, or something that you learned from, or that you would do differently had you the opportunity to do it over again?
I will say this to any young person who's working on any project, whether it's independent as an entrepreneur or within a firm, that up front, you've got to make sure that you understand the scope and the parameters of the project and get that kind of thing in writing, because when you're young, they will often try to take advantage of you, especially on any kind of design project, where they might start adding, edits that were clearly out of scope of the contract and trying to get you to do, free work.
Yeah.
And I had basically, my worst jobs were things that, when I was younger, and I was so afraid of, losing a client, or afraid of not being able to build upon things, that I would let, I probably had some projects that I built for half of what I should have built for.
Right.
And that's just something that, once you get more experienced and you realize just how important contracting is and just how important those upfront understanding of goals and objectives and parameters.
So would you say it's very important to understand your worth?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, for sure. Yeah.
So understanding your worth and then also having that worth in writing in contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and also, but I will say too is that don't overestimate your work too. Because there's a lot of people, young, uh, gosh, I don't want to sound like the old guy who's like, oh, everybody gets a trophy generation. So, but you've got to realize too that you are part of a larger marketplace with a lot of fish in the sea,
Right.
with comparable skills, and you've got to know when to hold fast. You've got to know when to be prepared to negotiate.
Yeah.
Especially, you kind of base that on how much you want something.
Yeah, definitely. So how has the creative contractor, creative consultant industry changed since you first entered it and since you first started? Like, have you noticed
Well,
any big changes?
yes, I have noticed. Number one, creative contractors who work independently now they seem to recognize more the power of networking and building networks with other people that are working independently. Before it was a lot of lone wolves who were, you know, you couldn't help but be, competitive because that was, the kind of nature of it. But
Right,
I
right.
think this, social media and, the internet, people recognize that, hey, I've got, I can't do everything myself. I can bring some like-minded individuals in on a project to create, a bigger, instead of taking 100% of a smaller pie, I
Yeah.
can help create a bigger pie that we can all share in and and make even more. So yeah, the just the growth in networks, and also I would say
So summarize,
big change.
that's also, so that first part is also representation, right? And
Yeah.
giving creative contractors and consultants a real voice, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And there's just a lot more too. I mean that the gig economy and people quote unquote side hustles that they hope to
Right, right.
make is just growing exponentially. Yeah.
Well, that's how I started, right? But
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. So I guess, would you say it's easier then now to start as a creative contractor consultant in this marketplace, or do you think it would be more difficult starting out when you first started?
I think in one way it's easier because there are more tools to help you get started. It's easier for the layperson to get started.
Yeah.
But also because, like I said, because there's so many more people clamoring for the same type of independent opportunities,
Right.
it's more competitive.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Cool. Do you have any advice for people that need to differentiate themselves and find their own niche within the creative consultant industry?
Yes, I would say.
Because you kind of fell into it, right? I think your story
Yeah,
is a very fortunate story, right? What would you say
yeah,
to
and
someone that's maybe struggling to find their niche?
it's it's a little bit yes, yeah. There was some serendipity for me personally.
Yeah.
Some things came together, but like I said, it's also at those low level jobs that I had, which that didn't pay. Like I said, it started out for me volunteering.
Right.
That
Right.
volunteer though, I made sure that I hit it out the ballpark, even though I was working
Yeah.
for nothing. In the
Right.
beginning, I worked for nothing for a lot of the things I did for the tailors before they actually hired me and gave me a salary. Um, so yeah, I got myself a little off track. But basically, what I'm saying is that for anybody who is going in that wants to distinguish themselves, like I said, that hard work, sure, but also it's important that you establish that not only can you do the job that you're trying to do, but that you can think that you can think and share your thoughts on your job and your process. So one of the biggest helps for me has been keeping this insights part of my site, this blog where I write about my process.
Right.
And my clients, potential clients, have really have taken to that. So if you have that ability to not only do your job, but show that you can write and that you're very thoughtful about it at a higher level, that's a great way to distinguish yourself.
That's interesting, because part of that is I guess you could say that your niche is also somewhat tied to your own personality and who you are, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, cool. For sure. Yeah, that personal brand, is definitely a big part of it. And I ignored that for so long. I kind of regret it, because I'm not a digital native. I'm analog digital. I remember when the internet and all these things were born, and so I was very suspicious of social media in the beginning, and I would treat it as either an afterthought or sometimes with just disdain, like I didn't like, when it came, I was like, oh God, these people deleting my book. But I realize now that it's like anything, you can put that to your personal advantage, and I want to thank you for encouraging me to write more, because that has helped me a lot to distinguish my brand and who am I and what I'm about. And so that when people are looking for skills like mine, they can go to my site, they can read about what I am, and they can see that, this guy isn't just
a name.
He's in action, but he's also, he's also a thinker.
Yeah, well, you're so welcome, and it's been a pleasure working together all these years.
Yes.
What have you found to be the most important thing to consistently bring in clients?
Most important thing to consistently, well, one is to just be consistent, to always deliver, to always be collaborative with your clients, and that means always asking a lot of questions, especially up front, and to then to get feedback after the job is done, because you want to make sure that that you not only hit the target, but you exceeded the target.
Right. So being consistent in your work and your efforts is a strong tool to help bring in new clients.
Yes, for sure, because that's what builds word of mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. What is something you still haven't done in your career, or a client that you still haven't worked with that you want to?
Oh gosh, no! If I say it out loud, it won't happen. I'm super sick.
Well, can you give a hint? Maybe first letter of the company in the industry.
As far as some things that I would love to collaborate on a project where what's left behind, the artifact that is left behind, is something that I feel that future generations can look to. I've done some things that I think that I'm super proud of, but I would love to just be a part of something that, especially nowadays, because we're in some difficult times.
Yeah, definitely.
I did this video, and part of this video that I had done for the healthcare industry was that I wanted to say that, when we're out of this dilemma, I wanted something that was a statement that of what I personally, believed in and thought. And so I'd love to do more of that, So I guess in a way I've done some of it, but I would just love to do more of it and to make maybe an even bigger impact on it.
Yeah. So leaving a legacy at this point is very important to you.
Yeah. Transferring my knowledge to that next generation of visual facilitators is really important to me.
Right. Do you feel that part of that is being accomplished through your writings and stuff?
I think so. I hope so. I get a lot of nice, encouraging emails from people who are just starting out and asking questions. So yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Cool. Should we expect a book from you sometime in the next few years?
I think that is yes.
Yes.
Yes. I
Cool.
think yes. It's going to be a joke book and some dirty limericks. Oh wait, no.
Cool.
No, yeah, no. A
Look
book
for it on the
on
shelves.
my process and my work. Yeah, that is something that I am always working on.
Right. So I know that recently you were invited to speak at an event, and I know it fell through. But do you have some advice for people that want to become thought leaders or speakers, and how they can tailor their message to a specific audience?
Well, first off, I would say that the event that fell through, I was going to be the opening keynote speaker at the International Forum of Visual Practitioners, which is a big conference of, graphic facilitators and graphic recorders, infographic designers. And because of the pandemic, they had to cancel the physical event, but now they're going to do a series of virtual meetings.
Right.
And so
Right.
I'm still going to do a keynote. I'm actually was writing it yesterday, taking my first early drafts. So that is going to be June 27th when I do that virtual keynote at the ifvp.org if anybody wants to be a part of that. If you want to become a thought leader, so that one day you can get asked to be a keynote speaker, in whatever your chosen field is, well, that you have to show and prove that you are a thought leader. So yes, start a blog, start writing about your process, start
Right.
writing about the work and the products and the projects that you've been a part of, and deconstruct them and be honest about what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So my last question before we wrap up. So obviously, a lot of business as usual has been disrupted by the COVID pandemic. Um, what advice do you have for creatives right now that aren't getting as much work and are looking for things to do right now? How can they come out of this in a more improved state than when they began?
Well, embrace mobility, first of all. Like if whatever your industry is, there are mobile apps and tools that can augment what you do. And then even more important than that is that now is not the time to disconnect.
Yeah.
So you might feel bad about like, oh gosh, this, and sometimes that will bring on a kind of a natural, fear reaction. But now is not the time to go inward, it's the time to go outward. So
Right.
look to make connections with other people in your industry, reach out to former clients, send messages to potential clients, blog and this kind of thing. Just connect with society.
Right.
Virtually, of course, because we can't do this physically, but now's
Right,
the
right.
time to connect.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to be linking all of Christopher's socials and website in the description below. Yeah, thank you again for taking the time to do this video with me, and I look forward to speaking soon.
Thank you, Callum. It was a pleasure.